Now, the Caribbean is known for its beautiful beaches, but there is none more beautiful than this one, Anse Beach. It's the largest one on Grenada. It stretches almost 4 miles long. And that means no matter what time of day you get here, or what day of the week it is, it never feels crowded. It feels like your own little piece of paradise. Unlike most beaches on Grenada, which are on the west coast of the island and face the Caribbean Sea, La Sagesse is on the east coast and fronts the rougher Atlantic Ocean. This is one of those rare, sheltered gems on this side of the island, and you almost always have it to yourself. But you won't be roughing it because the La Sagesse Hotel is right at the beach and has a terrace restaurant overlooking the Strand. And, insider's tip, the grilled lobster lunch is a real treat. Back on the Caribbean side, Morne Rouge Beach, just over the hill from Anse, as well as our hotel, is a scenic gem. Sometimes called BBC Beach because of the many TV shows, commercials, and fashion shoots that take place here, it's probably the best place on the island to catch a winter sunset. In fact, the smart money starts lining up ringside seats for the show at one of the beachside bars in the late afternoon. Grenada's beaches have some of the prettiest sunsets in the Caribbean. And if you don't believe me, just take a look. Conditions are right to catch a glimpse of the elusive green flash. Fingers crossed. Well, the crowd appreciated another great show, courtesy of Old Sol and the BBC Beach. Life isn't entirely about the beach here on Grenada. The interior of the island is equally lush and beautiful, and today we're going to explore it. The grounds around our hotel, the Blue Horizons Garden Resort, are so peaceful and pretty that it's sometimes hard to leave the property. I was once again working with an old friend, Edwin, a driver and guide I met on my first magazine photo assignment on the island in the late 80s. Now, I'm happy to say that we're both still upright, and we'll be hearing more from Edwin later, because he is also a first-class historian as well as a guide. And he's a stickler for punctuality, so we were soon on our way to the interior of the island. Grenada has at least a dozen notable waterfalls, and most of the main ones come with entertainment in the form of cliff divers. The first time I visited Annandale Falls in the late 80s, I met two very young guys here called Superfly and Butterfly, and these guys are still working today. Our second stop was the beautiful Concord Falls. Here, visitors can swim in the pool at the base of the falls. It can be a little daunting, though. That's where the friendly lifeguards come in and will offer assistance to swim behind the falls. But these guys are more than Baywatch eye candy. They do their jumping from over 65 feet up. And it is breathtaking, not to mention heart-stopping. They've got it down to a science. The national park takes its name from the Grand Etang Lake, a crater lake and an extinct volcano that was responsible for the formation of the whole island. Not to worry, because it hasn't erupted in 12,000 years. It's approximately 20 feet deep and covers an area of about 36 acres. Now, it's rumored to be home to a mermaid living in the depths that lures men to their watery graves. The only beauty I saw was Lita, who works at a fruit stand near the park entrance and whose image is featured in many travel posters for Grenada. And I wouldn't be surprised if she were the inspiration for that lovely statue we saw earlier in the hotel garden. Well, it wouldn't be called a rainforest if it didn't occasionally rain, and boy did it come down hard. But by that time, Peggy, Edwin, and I were eating lunch, a local dish called saltfish and provisions. And it's not going to replace pizza or a burger and fries as a favorite food, but it filled the gap. Our last stop in the park was to see the Morne monkeys. Although with this particular group, I'm not sure who needed the protection more, the monkeys or the visitors. However, not everyone was amused. We were driving over the Balthazar River when a splash of bright color caught our eye, and we happened to see the launch of a group of rafters. While the currents and rapids of this river high up in the rainforest are not exactly Class 5, it sure looked like a fun way to spend a couple of hours. We were tempted, but we had a couple of more important stops on our itinerary. One of the strangest sights on Grenada are the rotting hulks of two old aircraft, one Russian, one Cuban, at the now disused Pearls Airport in the island's northern interior. These aging skeletons are fascinating to explore, and they are remnants of a very controversial time in the history of this small island, when tiny Grenada was suddenly thrust into the center of the world stage. Troubles began soon after Grenada became an independent nation, out from under the rule of the United Kingdom, in February of 1974. Now, since I'm not a historian or a political commentator, I'm not going to get into the complex politics and policy arguments behind exactly what happened, because to this day, the causes and events that ensued are subjects of hot debate. Instead, I'll ask my friend Edwin who was working at a radio station here when things went haywire, to give us his take.
We had a people's revolution, so to speak, where young, enthusiastic professionals led a Marxist-Leninist overthrow of a democratically elected government. That was on March 13, 1979. That particular endeavor or experiment or whatever imploded ideologically in the space of 4.5 years. One side basically liquidated the other because Maurice Bishop and 3 of his cabinet colleagues, along with other close aides, were among those executed at Fort George. At the time, they called it Fort Rupert. So with that dramatic, unfortunate killing of Maurice Bishop and others, Ronald Reagan quickly moved and launched what he later called Operation Urgent Fury, and that brought an end to that military council that took power after the killing of Bishop.
President Reagan wanted to act quickly and decisively. The primary purpose of Operation Urgent Fury, he said, was to protect American citizens on the island. There were over 600 medical students at St. George's University alone. No one could guarantee their safety, the U.S. said, if the local situation further deteriorated. While many students were happy to get off the island, over 60% of the Americans on the island stayed put and did not evacuate. But there may have been another, more strategic reason why the action took place.
Because remember, Reagan had real issues with the fact that the Cubans were helping us with our much needed international airport. And he did say repeatedly that he will not sit idly by and tolerate the emergence of another Cuba in the Caribbean.
The president was concerned that the longer runway at the new airport would be used for military purposes by Cuba, who was providing much of the support to build it. So the intervention, or the invasion, depending on who you're talking to, went forward. Soon after, the new international airport was completed, and just a few years ago, renamed in honor of Maurice Bishop.
And that marked what some may describe as a return to democracy, because in 1984, we had the first election since 1976. And since then, we have been practicing democracy. It's a Westminster-style democracy.
And what about Pearl's Airport? Well, it's still a graveyard for these old wrecks, but the long runway lives on as the Pearls International Speedway. One of the premier drag racing venues in the Caribbean. The River Antoine Estate Distillery, our last stop of the day, has been around so long that it appeared as the number 41 on a map of Grenada commissioned by the King of France in 1780. And it was a bit of a time machine. Here at the River Antoine Rum Distillery, they've been making rum for a real long time. Over 200 years, as a matter of fact. And they're using all the same machinery as when they started in the late 1700s. There's a saying in these parts, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's take a look at how it's done.
We start off by using our fresh sugarcane that is grown right here on the factory. And we begin with the power of the water wheel, which might just be the oldest one left anywhere in the Caribbean and still working almost 200 years. The water comes from Antoine River itself. We've got our own reservoir, and that runs down an aqueduct onto the wheel, powering that wheel, enabling us to do the crushing of the sugarcane.
The juice is extracted by crushing the sugarcane with a large millstone, powered by the water wheel. The dregs are taken out to be dried, after which they'll be used to fire up the boilers when the distilling starts.
Once the sugarcane is crushed, the juice is collected in what we call the boiling house, where we work on the concentration. So within that boiling house is where we work on the sweetness in the sugarcane. Now that's very important towards getting the full strength 75% by volume. And one of the ways we can do so is to boil the cane juice to evaporate some of the excess water. course, the distillation is where the magic happens. Because if you look at the beginning of the process, sometimes it tends to put you off from drinking. The distillation has to do with evaporation and condensation. So we are putting into a big copper boiler 300 gallons of that fermented juice, and we're going to be firing that up with wood. Now, once this heats up, because the alcohol is lighter, it burns up first. So that moves through those tubes as a vapor or gas, reaches a condensing coil, change back to liquid, and there we have the process.
Well, I've been in the tasting room here at River Antoine for a while and sampled almost every rum they make, but I've saved the strongest for last. This is Royale. It's 150 proof. That means it's 75% alcohol. It's so strong that they won't let you take it home on the airplane because it's considered a flammable liquid. Let's give it a try. Oh yeah, that's Firewater for sure.